Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to wait a few minutes. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. It's our first time to do this, so we're running into a few problems. I had to change the link, so just so everyone's aware of that, the link had to be changed. I will give everybody plenty of time to get on there tonight. I need to find my old one so that I can turn that off. We got our events coming up right here. That one is old, so I'm going to new address. Oh, just so you guys know. It's not posting anything here. I'm here. I clicked the wrong button and ended it right away. There we go. Let's get some people on here. Waiting for Dan. Just so everybody knows, it is 7:01. Stay on this page. Boom, 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 and edit, save. Come on. Nothing wants to work right tonight. Leave this page. Make sure we have the right one. Vanessa, can you join, please? Right now, you should be watching me live. This is not working well. Right now, you should be watching me live. This is not working well. So here we go, waiting. Where are you? Can you please connect, Vanessa? She doesn't know how. Just go to Facebook and go to all that. That's gonna be the problem. No one's gonna read. So that's just what's on YouTube. Gotta go to Google Plus if you the events or go. I just posted the event. Yeah, this is a nightmare. I don't know, but Patty, I'm busy. Okay. No, you can't. Okay, so here we go. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I know that some of you are watching me live. I'm in, but it doesn't have a place for him to turn on the cam. I don't see anyone on the new broadcast. So I'm just going to assume people are watching this, is what I'm hoping. And I'm just going to go ahead and start teaching the class. Waiting for Dan to come on. He's also going to be helping me, but I'm not seeing him on there yet. Maybe one thing you guys could do is I will monitor some comments here. Waiting for Dan to come on. He's also going to be helping on YouTube. So if you're watching it on YouTube, you maybe send me something there, make a comment that says you're watching. Oh, it says 9 are watching now. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So I apologize. We had to move links around. This is our first time to try it. If this works out well, then we will be able to keep doing this. So I'm supposed to have more people involved tonight, but we're going to go ahead. I wanted to talk about just Photoshop tonight. This is kind of our new format that rather than having to go out of town, we can reach you right where you're at. And I always like to say, I've been teaching Photoshop now for about 4 years all around the United States. And what I've come to find out is there is no such thing as a expert at Photoshop. There just isn't any. All it just means is if somebody claims to be an expert, they've made more mistakes than you've made. So Photoshop really isn't difficult. A lot of people just have a lot of holes in their learning. And so over the next months, we want to start working on filling in some of those holes so that you could be more proficient at Photoshop. We are going to be looking at doing some Lightroom classes. I know a lot of photographers out there like to use Lightroom. I'm not a huge fan of Lightroom simply because I believe I feel a little bit handicapped when I'm playing in Lightroom versus everything else. So thank you, those of you that now are starting to email me and telling me that they're seeing me. So what I really had planned on today was I wanted to kind of give, whenever I teach this, there's someone that I teach with, and one of the things that we like to do is kind of give a little test before we start teaching so people kind of know where they're at. Because every time I'm teaching it, normally in a classroom setting, we have trainers, and one of us is doing the advanced track, one's doing more of the beginning to intermediate track, and people never know what track they want to go into. So we always do a little test in the morning to kind of show people, well, this is, if all this stuff flies over your head, then you probably are going to want to be in the beginning to intermediate track. If you understood everything, then you're going to want to stay in the advanced track. So I'm going to stay more in that beginner to intermediate range tonight. I'm not going to be looking at any advanced things. Dan and I want to talk about some things. If I can get him on here, we'll talk about printing and things like that. But I want to start by, since this is our first one, kind of giving you a little bit of that test. What's going to happen is you're going to watch me edit a photo, and I'm not really going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to explain a couple things that I'm doing, but I'm not really going to stop and tell you, well, this is the button that I'm touching. Those will be in upcoming lessons. What I want you to do for a minute is just kind of watch me as I talk you through a little small composite. And what I want to do is I want to show you there's 6 major areas in Photoshop that you need to understand. And that is selections, layers, masks, blending modes, clipping masks, and opacity. I used to tell everybody, all you need to know is layers, masks, selections, and that really is the core. If you understand those 3 things, you will understand Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Photoshop and start working through this little test that I have set up. So I'm going to go ahead. This is, again, my first time using this program. I'm going to go ahead to screen 1 and share. Now, all of you should be seeing that. The side, I'm not really looking at any notes. I'm looking at my second screen. Normally, I put bridge up in my screen off to my right, and then I work on Photoshop. And then once I get my projects going, well, then I turn Netflix on so that I can watch movies or TV while I edit. So I have 4 kids, so that's like the only way I can ever watch TV is to do it while I'm working. So you guys should be looking at Bridge right now. In the next couple weeks, we're going to start talking about. I'm going to start in our next time that we meet, if we figure this all out, is I'm going to start with Bridge the next time and talk about Bridge. Bridge is one of the most fabulous products in the entire Creative Suite. If you have Photoshop, you have Bridge. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a couple pictures here. These are actually a couple of pictures I used to make the little heading for tonight's class. So I'm going to open up. I got my background and I got my foreground. And so I'm going to work through those 6 layers. Remember, selections, layers, mask, blending modes, clipping mask, opacity. If you're missing any of these 6, don't feel bad because most people don't. So let's just go ahead. And the first thing I want to do is I want to cut my friend Victoria out of this picture. And I want to put her on this beautiful background picture I shot one evening walking around in Honolulu. So again, this isn't our time where we're going to talk about this is the right tool, the wrong tool. I really do believe when we are cutting things out, I believe the pen tool is the right tool. But we've had some new versions of Photoshop come out, and some of our tools are working better than others. This particular tool here, our quick selection tool, I really do like, and I do use it quite a bit for doing things as long as I know that it's going to work. I will tell a couple of the keystrokes that I am doing, but I'm not going to explain it in depth tonight. I'm adding to my selection. If you were to look at my cursor, you would see a little plus symbol in the middle of my cursor as it's adding to that selection. If I want to take away it, I'm just going to hold down my Alt key, and that's going to subtract out of that selection. So I can keep adding and subtracting. Again, all stuff we will talk about in upcoming lessons. This is just, again, more of the test to kind of see where you're at in Photoshop. Those of you that know me know that I can keep talking the entire time. I like to talk. I think that's why I get paid to teach this. Not that I'm great at Photoshop. I do understand it very well, but I'm great at talking about Photoshop. So what I'm just going to do is quickly select her out. We don't need her toes tonight. We're going to cut her off anyways. So I've made my rough selection there, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mask out that background. Hopefully you're using masks. I always tell everybody, if you'll notice, they've given us the ability to customize our toolbars. I've actually, my eraser tool I was going to take off of there. You can actually remove tools now in the latest version. But I have another gentleman, Will Hammond, that I work with quite a bit. He's out of Kansas City and has been teaching Photoshop for about 20 years since the beginning. And he always tells me, people always come up to him and they always go, Will, I don't really want to learn Photoshop. I just want you to teach me how to cut out around hair. And he's always said, that's kind of like someone saying, I don't really want to go to medical school, but can you just teach me brain surgery? So Photoshop has a brain surgery tool, and it sits right here inside of our mask properties, and it's called our mask edge. And this particular tool right here, I'm going to go ahead and view this on layer so you can see it happening. It's already pre-selected. The tool is right up here in the top corner. I'm just going to kind of paint around right here, and I'm going to let it go, and you're going to start seeing brain surgery happen. You see how great that cuts out around hair? It's not perfect, but it works very, very well. I'm getting some kind of a message here, so bear with me because this is, again, our maiden voyage here. Back to here. Got a little carried away. I'm going to back that out, that last thing there. We're going to leave that alone. Again, I'm not worried about doing this too great. This is just kind of to show you a general thing that we're doing here. Dan telling me he needs to be invited. I learned a valuable lesson, and that is never go live on Hangouts and stop it, because once you do that, it assumes you're done with it. So you're seeing really quickly how I can come in here and clean up an image using the Refine Mask tool. It's a fantastic tool, does things really quickly. I can make adjustments on how fine it works just based on how big of the tool is. Let's make sure we get that back in there. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay, and I'm going to accept that. And we're just going to, for tonight, say that's good enough. So we've selected her out. We've made a nice selection around the hair. I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and drag her up and place her right inside this image. So see, we've done a decent job there. It's not great, like I said. And we'll place her about right here. Looks fine to me. And a lot of times when I'm working inside of a composite, I would have cut her out better. But little trick a lot of people don't know is I can double click on my layer, and it brings up my layer styles. Here's my layer styles here. My computer doesn't know what screen to put things up on because I've moved it so much. And I'm going to go ahead and put a inner glow on her. I'm going to cancel first because I want you to see this happening. You can kind of see it's not great cut out around, but we'll make it work for tonight. Bring this up. I'm going to put down something like an inner glow. I'll grab my little eyedropper here and I'll select one of my background color, bright colors. And I'm going to bring this up so you can kind of see what's going on. See how it kind of put a glow around her? I'm going to back that off right there, because if that sunlight was behind her, it would be throwing a little bit of a glow. This obviously is not cleaned up very well, but for tonight, we're going to say that's okay. And you're looking at that going, yeah, I can see what that's doing, but it's also putting it in areas I don't want it to go on. Well, I'll bet a lot of you don't know this, that if I just right click on my layer styles on my layers here, and I say create a layer, it will actually put that layer style on its own layer and clip it to the layer below. Again, if you're not following, don't worry. Right now, we're just giving you a little test to kind of find out where you're at, your knowledge base inside of Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead. I can throw a mask. Whoops, not a mask there. I want to put a mask on this layer. And now with the mask on there, I can go about masking off certain areas. Like I probably wouldn't have light hitting this side of her shoulder if she was turned away. Probably not on this side of her dress either. Most of it is going to be coming up from the other side. I don't like what it's doing there, so I'm going to mask it off. And then this stuff in here, getting a little too much in here, probably a little much there. It wouldn't be on this side of her arm, but it might be a little bit underneath there. Probably not on the underside of the ukulele. And let's go ahead and say that looks about all right. You're looking at it going, I don't know what he's seeing because it doesn't look all right to me. That is because I still have one more little secret weapon, and that's opacity. I like to do things a little bit too much because I can start at 0 and I can start putting that outer glow back on. So there we go. I have that going there. And, it's very subtle, but you can see how if I would have cut out her a little bit better, if you're looking along her arm down here, it looks like that setting sun's glowing around the back of her arm. Again, not trying to do things great. One of the other things that I'll do a lot of times is trying to match my colors. And I'll do something like this. I'll make a copy of the background, drag it over the top of everything, and then go up to my filter menu. And underneath blur, we have something that's called average. Average is kind of like taking all the colors in this picture and sticking it in a blender and giving me the average color. So it gives me kind of this purplish color. Well, I'm going to use one of my blending modes like overlay. There we go, to kind of match the colors. The problem is I don't want to put more color on the background. So I'm just going to hold down my Alt button and put my cursor in between the two and click, so that I'm only applying it to her. So now she kind of has that same tinting as the background does. Again, just trying to move quickly through it. But let's look at now, let's say we were done. There would be tons of other things we could be doing. For instance, possibly like throwing a background layer between her and the background and grabbing a paintbrush and maybe grabbing a little bit of white here. And I might do something like if she's being lit up by a softbox, well, then there would be light, atmospheric light kind of around her. She wouldn't be just sitting in this dark pool of light. That doesn't look great. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw a little bit of noise. I'm going to add some noise to that white. That looks good enough. We're going to accept it. I'm going to run my opacity down. I'm just going to run this up a little bit. So see how it kind of brightens up the area. Whoops, the wrong one there. It brightens up kind of the atmospheric area around her. So it kind of looks like there really was a softbox out there lighting her. So again, here's what I want you to look at. I want you to see we used selections. We selected her out. We used layers. We used masks. We used blending modes up top here. You can see we use a blending mode like screen, a blending mode like overlay. We use clipping masks, and we also used opacity. So again, those are those 6 concepts that you really need to understand. Once you understand those concepts, then Photoshop becomes really easy. So we're going to put this out here. I'm going to throw me back up there. If you can see me, let's brighten me up a little bit. It seems to want to jump around every time. So those are those 6 main concepts that you need to understand. If all of those things just rocketed over your head and you just went, oh my goodness, I have no clue what he had just done, then you look forward to, we're going to be putting on an entire series where I'm going to teach an entire basic course. And we're going to start right from the beginning. What we'll talk about is bridge. Then we'll move on to what is a layer? What is a mask? What is a vector versus what is a raster? We'll move into things like that evil toolbar that sits on the left-hand side. What do all of those do? We'll work through those tools. How do you use the tool? Like the pen tool. If you've ever tried to use it, it's a difficult tool to master if you're trying to do it on your own. But if somebody gives you a little bit of help, you'll find that it's really easy to use. It's the right tool to use. I'm going to just quickly, hopefully not to lose you here. I'm not going to click anything out. I am going to try to set up an invite so I can see if I can get Dan on here or not. And I'm just reading here. It says that you're watching. I don't know how to add another presenter. So we may have to just wait for that conversation. What I had asked Dan to do is to talk about how to prepare a print for print. Most of you know that Dan's owned a print shop for a number of years, and he is one of the premier printers around, himself and his wife, Anna, do an incredible job, and they just know printing inside and out. If anybody you've ever taken anything to Dan, I remember the first few times I took things in and I would bring it in and Dan would kind of go, hey, do you mind that if I look at this and maybe make a few adjustments? And like every photographer, you go, sure, I guess you could, but I'm kind of afraid of, you changing my art. But I rapidly found out he really knew what he was doing. He would do things like, let's look at your shadows. You have too much blue in there. And I'd scratch my head and go, I don't see that. And he'd go, well, let me just show you something. And next thing you know, my picture just went from what I thought was a 10. Suddenly I realized it was a 7. But when Dan got done, it was back up to a 10. It was unbelievable what he can do with things. So I will reschedule that to be done. I do like this format if it works for all of us. So I'm just going to move right along because I am not seeing anywhere, Dan, I know that you're watching this, how to invite people. So other than clicking on give you an invite and sending you an invite, but I think it thinks that I can't allow more than anybody else to join. So anyways, let's just keep moving on and let's bring Photoshop back up. So let's go back to our screen number 1. There you go. So we're back to Photoshop. We're going to go ahead and close Victoria out there. Um, I'd like to talk about a couple new features that are in Photoshop that maybe you don't know exists. And then I'll talk about some tips. So this is kind of like our in the middle here, our little commercial for Photoshop. These are things that you're not going to find inside of Lightroom, but things are happening well. So I'm just going to check. I'm having people telling me whether or not. I'm hoping the voice, that was my wife telling me the voice isn't matching well. I hope that it is for you because I know that can be a little distracting. So let's look at a few of the new features inside Adobe that I think are really cool. So the first one that I'm going to do is I shot some pictures a week ago of one of my friends from grade school who plays in a band, and he was down from Portland, and they were playing, and got to do some pictures of him. And I thought this would be a good picture to show you one of the new features. The feature that I'm going to show you is actually right here called Adobe Color Themes. If you have CC, the newest version of CC that you've kept it updated, you have the Adobe Color Themes. All you have to do is go Windows, and then you must go to Extensions, and then put Adobe Color Themes, and it will be put in your toolbar. So this is the Adobe Color Theme. So this is the way it works. I'm going to go ahead and press I and get my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select like a color in his shirt, kind of move it around until I find a green color I like. It's all kind of looking the same, but I'm going to grab, like, for instance, looking for a lighter, there we go, a little bit lighter color. So we have this color wheel, and what you'll see is I can do analogous, I can't say the word, monochromatic, a triad of colors, complementary colors, compound colors, shades of color, and custom colors. So I'm going to stick it on complementary colors. As photographers and as designers, we like to work with complementary colors. So I've selected that green, and then right under the circle, right in the middle, it says set the selected color from active color. So I'm going to click on that. What it did is it chose the color that I had selected on my palette here, and then it said, here are the complementary colors. Why is this important? Because so many of us now are having, with weddings or senior portraits or even commercial work, having to become designers. And one thing you'll find out really fast is we're horrible designers. There's a lot more to designing than just, hey, I think this looks nice. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. This will take away some of the guesswork for you. So I put in here a couple different words. So we're going to select his name, that line. There we go. Here we go. There, and there. We're going to select these three, which is the Willie Gilmore, the line, and Anchors of Ascension. Well, the next thing I forgot to do is right here it says add to swatches. I'm going to click here, and it's going to add these swatches to my library, which is really neat because now I can say, here, let's make it purple. My line, let me change that. I know what's going on with my line. It is a vector, and it thinks it has a stroke around it, so I need to turn that stroke off. So there we go. Let's choose these all three again, and I can say, there we go. Here's what it looks like purple. Here's what it looks like with the same green. Here's a different color green. That's a complementary green. This one's more of a darker, but it gives you complementary colors instead of you trying to figure it out. It's doing it for you. Let's go up here to this Schecter bass guitars, and how about we hit green up there? And again, it's just doing a lot of that extra work for you. So now you can kind of see a before and after. Again, this picture didn't have a lot of color to begin with. It's got rich colors, but it's not a huge palette. But you can start seeing how it works. So maybe you're looking at that and you're going, yeah, I never put text on things, so that's not a lot of interest to me. There's other things that we use it for. So let's go ahead and close this out. I'm going to bring up this picture that we shot from one of the workshops of this young girl by her car, and we're just going to go ahead and accept whatever was on there. I think this is just straight out of and it's going to pop up here. There you go. So we're going to look at this color, this picture. And again, obviously the sun was straight behind her, reflecting in the lens, getting this nice hazy look. Not one of my favorite looks, but it's very popular now to shoot into the sun. What happens though is a lot of times if we shoot into the sun, we get this haze, but it's always colorized, that haze. And if you've ever tried to shift the colors from like warm to cool, it always kind of a guessing game where you're going, man, I really want it to have a yellow feel, but as I slide my sliders around to try to make it yellow, it gets weird on me. Well, using this Adobe color theme, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw these themes away in the trash can here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my eyedropper, and I'm just going to select somewhere like on the hood of the car here. We'll select a nice yellow. See if there's a brighter yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and set that again through that middle one. And I'm going to make those swatches come up here. See, I could also choose, let's even do that, compound colors. So here's the compound colors. Let's add those to our swatches. So now as we're working, let's try something like an adjustment layer of a solid color. And we're going to just say, okay, I don't really care what color it's using right now. And I'm going to set my blending mode to overlay. You can already see you're going, wow, that doesn't look great. But now I can kind of click around and say, well, how's this blue look? Or that one actually made it look very natural by choosing one of the compound colors. I actually kind of like, you know, kind of has that Instagram-y feel to it. This color right here kind of gives it more of that yellowy feel. And again, you may be going, it looks a little strange to me. Well, remember, I always have opacity. Let me show you a little shortcut if you don't know. All you have to do is click on your move tool, which is V on your keyboard. And as long as you've hit V, now if I hit the number 4 on my keyboard, see my opacity down here, it dropped to 40%. If I hit 2, it'll go to 20%. If I go 7, it'll go to 70%. I could hit 5 and 5 again, and it'll go to 55%. Go back to 30%. So it's a quick way to kind of try different things. You know, you may go, boy, 70, 50. So that's just a little keyboard shortcut you have there to do. So let's turn this on and off. There we go. You can kind of see the before and after. Again, rather than guessing what color to use, I'm using a complementary color. So that's the color select. I had one other thing here, just because we all love Krista. If you've been to my workshops, we love using her as a model. Same thing, you know, if we were trying to work on an ad for our class, rather than trying to figure out what color I should do it at, I came up with black. Well, maybe black isn't the only option. So there we go. I just had deleted one of my layers. Sorry about that. Let's grab our eyedropper tool really quick. And how about we just select a nice red that's up here in her hat, and we'll set that as our color. Let's don't go compound. Let's do complementary colors, and let's set those swatches up there. Now let's come up here and say, let's see, photo workshop, and I had to put a fill color in there to change my logo up. And now we can kind of click around and go, which one works well? Who would have thought, you know, to come up with a green color, but it is the opposite color from where we're at. Same thing with these kind of more magenta-y colors. I would have never thought to use magenta, but it is a complementary color to that particular shade of red. And it looks good. I think it actually looks really well. We're going to go to the rectangle, and I'm going to choose the same thing. Learn Photoshop techniques. How about we use something like this green so it pops off? Because they're complementary colors, it's going to really stand out. If you've ever tried to make things, a lot of times things get hidden. So we'll just kind of see how that goes. But again, hopefully you can start seeing how that Adobe color themes works. It's something, you know, at least you can search it. If you can't, you know, figure out exactly how I did it, it will help you quite a bit. So the next thing I want to talk about is Let's close these here. We'll leave this particular one up, and we're going to close our Adobe Color themes. It just stays nested there. We're all using hopefully action files. There's action files we purchase, there's action files that we make. I think Florabella makes the best action files out there. They're worth paying the money for. They're amazing. They work very well. They give you all of the layers so you can make minute adjustments, and they work perfect. But I want to talk about some of the different ones that you have that you don't know you have. For instance, star trails, text effects, textures, commands. These are all, if you use the little drop down menu on your actions palette here, you will see down here all of these listed: commands, frames, image effects, LAB, black and white techniques. All of these ones just are, they come with Photoshop, at least with CC now that they've added into there. You ever wanted to figure out how, well, you can shoot it with your camera, but if you're like me, I'm not patient. I don't want to stand out in the pitch black taking one photo as the stars rotate. I actually can use this star trails, and it will create that effect for me by running an action file. I won't show you that. You can play with it yourself, but things like this, text effects. I loaded these up. All you do is click on it, and then they load up in your palette here. So there's a bunch of different text effects here. Let's go ahead and hit T for our type tool, and let's put some text on here. We're going to grab our move tool and move this over here. So we have some text. And now we've got some different things. I was playing with this last night, this water reflection. Let's click on that and let's just hit play. Again, these are default actions that are in Photoshop today. Look what that did. It made like a little reflection there. We'll turn this off so you can see it a little bit better, the background. This, again, is all stuff that's just in there. If you've ever played with the action files that came with Photoshop over the last 20 years, they were garbage. They really didn't do anything that I could find that worked very well. But these new ones, I'm going to throw that away. Let's look at something like Chrome. So let's hit play. It says a photo layer, select a photo layer. You will add type later. So let's not do that one right now. Let's throw that away. How about a, right there, brushed metal. So we'll hit play and we're going to see what that's going to do. I've never even used this one. Again, it gives it kind of that cloudy metal look. It's all little things that, you know, we probably could figure out on our own with a cloud texture. But why do all that work when you have these action files already built in for you? The one that I thought was really cool that I found yesterday is, let's put a new layer, a blank layer here, and underneath these textures, how many times have you gone out looking for a texture to put behind an image? How about obsidian? Look at this. If I click here, it's going to make me an obsidian background. Boom. So there we go. I can do a layers, a levels adjustment on that and darken it up if I wanted to. They've got ones that are frosted glass, green slime, asphalt. You know, you wanted it to look like they were, well, here's stucco. You got somebody that you shot a picture of them on your ugly textured wall at home, and you're trying to lay something over it rather than search all over the internet trying to steal somebody's, you know, here's something really quickly, they'll give you a texture. So all kinds of neat stuff like that out there. And again, these are ones that are now already in there. This is another one that is really cool, is commands. If you load these command actions, you can make your own inside, right up top here, when you make a new action, and give them certain keyboard shortcuts that you want to as an action file. But look at these. Once these are loaded up, these are inside, built into my Photoshop now. So if I had a selection here, see, all I have to do now is hit F2. I'm going to hit F2 on it, my keyboard, and it cuts that selection out. You know, copy paste, I think is just as easy to go Control C, Control V as it is F3, F4. But, you know, you want to see your actions, it says F9. So I can close it. I can just hit F9 and it pops up. F9, it goes away. Same thing. Um, F10, show your navigator. Sometimes you're just sitting and you're working along something. You hit F10 and there's your navigator. So you know, let's close these out so you can see, you know where you are in your picture. If for some reason you were zoomed in, let's zoom in a little bit. So we're zoomed in and we were trying to maybe mask something out, or we're trying to cut something. We don't quite know where we're at, and that's not up. We can just hit F10 and there's our navigator, and we can navigate around now our photo to find the spots that we need to go to. So these things, again, they're already built into Photoshop, just waiting for you to use. Some of these things, rotate counterclockwise, rotate counterclockwise. These don't have commands already, so they're already right here ready to go. Snapshots, one day we'll talk about snapshots. Hopefully you're using those. But right there, that ought to be a few things that maybe you didn't even know existed inside of Photoshop. There's a couple actions there. We'll do an entire lesson just on action files. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And the next thing that I want to show you is, bring this up here, inside of Camera Raw. When I bring a photo up into Camera Raw, this particular image, we actually lit off smoke bombs in this little canyon to get this hazy effect to it. So this isn't light into my camera lens. This is actual smoke and it got too much. What happened was the wind shifted and it blew in our face, but we played around with it and you know, like some of the images that we had gotten. So again, this is straight out of camera, but under our effects tab right here, FX, if I click on that, it brings up this new slider, and I believe this is also built into the newest version of Lightroom, I believe I just read. But inside this slider, watch what happens when I move that slider to the right. It will remove the haze from this image. Look at what an amazing job that did. I'm zooming in here a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Now put it back to 0, straight out of camera, real smoke. And now here is that smoke gone. It's amazing what it can do. If I move the other way, I actually add more haze to the image. So, and if you think all it's doing is playing around with the contrast and it's kicking the blacks down, you can't do as good a job as that dehaze slider does. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, the algorithm that knocks that out. So if you ever get to a picture, maybe you took it as a little too foggy, you're at the beach, you want to see a little more detail, play with that dehaze slider. Maybe you shot into the sun and you didn't get that hazy effect that you want. Well, it's easy enough to just go in and add some more haze. This particular one's going to add the same color haze. So that's why it's kind of getting that gray look to it, but it's also because it's not white balanced yet. But what a neat tool that we can use to take haze. This will also, if you have lens flare that you're not seeing, lens flare, it's a haze created from the sun or a light at an angle across your lens. You can get rid of that by using this slider, and it holds up to print. It's just that amazing of a tool. So we're going to go ahead and close that right there. Now, I had some of my little top tips that I always like to share. We'll kind of finish up with this. I got 5 things that I want to show you that I think will be kind of cool to see. So the first one, let's open up an image, something we haven't looked at here. We'll bring up our little Alexis here so we can look at her. And again, we won't even set anything in Camera Raw. We'll just let it be what it looked like out of the camera. And we'll zoom in here. Throughout Photoshop, we have what's called scrubby sliders. If you look up here in our zoom tool, it says scrubby zoom. What does that mean? It means if I click and drag my mouse to the right, it's going to zoom in. If I click, drag my mouse to the left, it'll zoom out. That way I can scrub back and forth, left and right, and zoom in and out. I don't like using the scrubby zoom. And it's simply because a lot of times, I'm not using it tonight, I will use a Wacom tablet. And my hand will touch that tablet and it'll rake across there when I'm not paying attention, and it'll zoom in, and all of a sudden I lose my place. So I don't normally leave that on. I turn that off. That's just, I wanted to start at that point there. I want to show you some of the scrubby sliders. So for instance, what else do we mean by scrubby sliders? Let's put some text on here. Tell the truth. You're not here, so I can't see you raising your hands. How many of us have typed something like this and you said, oh, I need the text to be bigger? So you used your drop down menu and you said, how about 30? Oh, no, that's not big enough. 72. No, I still need it bigger. And you went, oh, there's no bigger number than 72. So what did we do? We went up here and we typed a 1 and said 172. And you said, no, I really want it bigger. So then you started saying 200. And you had to move it around and go, I need a little bit bigger. Don't do that anymore. If you watch closely, my cursor, when it reaches, see up here, this little 2 T's, that's the icon to tell me that I'm switching the size of my text. My cursor, when it gets across the TT, see the little hand with little arrows that popped up? That's a scrubby slider. What that means is if I click now and drag my mouse to the right, the numbers go up. If I drag to the left, the numbers go down. So there's no more of this. How big should this be? It's just back and forth. So now you can start seeing how well that works. So let's say we wanted it this big. There's my scrubby slider. So we'll get out of our text tool. Our opacity. How many times do we use the drop down menu? I already showed you if you hit the V key, you can make big jumps by tens by hitting those keys. However, instead of doing this, what I would suggest, get in the habit of, see the word opacity, as soon as my cursor goes over it, I have that scrubby slider. So I click and I drag my mouse to the left and my numbers go down. I drag it back to the right, the numbers go up. There's lots of scrubby sliders throughout Photoshop, including, again, we don't want to make this about, tools that a lot of us don't know anything about, but have you ever tried to use something like a curves dialog? And we're not going to talk about curves, but those of you who have used it, you find it really difficult because you're saying, wow, I want to maybe brighten her coat up a little bit, or this background up, and there's some areas of her face I want to brighten. And you have to guess where that is. And what would happen is we would, slide this up here and we would try to guess, well, maybe that's where her skin is. And next thing you know, everything's crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo that. See right up here, I've got a scrubby slider inside of Photoshop, inside the curves dialog under my adjustment layers. So I'm going to click on that. And now you're going to see it's an eyedropper. But look over here at the curves as I move that eyedropper around. Whatever I'm touching on shows me exactly where on that curve that's going to be. So then what I do is I click and it becomes a scrubby, and it drags up from that point, or I scrub down my mouse and I can move that point. So now I can look at her jacket and go, that looks good, but now her face is too dark. So let's click and drag her face back down a little bit, and maybe her hair, we want to darken some of that. So you can kind of get the picture. We can now play. Suddenly our curves dialog box becomes easy to work with, where before it became extremely difficult. So that is scrubby sliders. I'm just, again, first time using this. I'm letting everyone know that that everything I believe is running okay. So we're going to move on. So that's scrubby sliders. The next thing is this is one of my favorite things when I teach the class. And this is one that I was embarrassed that I didn't know. So let's say Control A, and now that we know we have scrubby sliders, let's get that text about this big. If I double click on this layer, which brings up my layer styles, which is also down here, I can double click. Let's make this, there we go. And let's put a drop shadow on this text. I had used Photoshop for almost 8 years. And one day I was working on something and I was moving this angle of light around to kind of make the direction that this was happening at. And I was moving the distance of how far the spread was at. And a friend of mine who I teach a lot with, he suddenly went, "Stop. What are you doing?" I said, "I'm adjusting the angle and the distance." He said, "Don't do that. Take your mouse and take it over to the shadow. Now click and move the shadow around. You actually can just move that shadow at will, and you don't have to worry about clicking and typing in numbers. Just move that shadow around." That was one of my big aha moments with Photoshop. And I went, "Wow, that's wonderful. That's a new feature. When did they put that in?" And he said, "Photoshop 3, not CS3, but Photoshop 3. It'd been around for something like 17 years that you've been able to do that." And I didn't know that. So don't feel bad. That's just one of my favorite things to show people. So I thought I would show that tonight. Um, Again, a lot of times when we're working in Photoshop, it's about, if you're doing it as a hobby, it's okay to just play with Photoshop. And I actually encourage people, you want to learn Photoshop, you need to play in it because it's just Xbox for grown-ups. And that's the way you're going to learn how to use this program is, try to cut your head off and put it on a different picture. But if you're having to do this for things to make a living, or you're doing lots of weddings and things, sometimes it's just speed will help you improve your workflow. Did you know, rather than saying file, open, and looking for a file, that all you have to do is double click on the center of your desktop there, and it will bring up that dialog box. And again, I know if you're fairly new to it, you're going to go, "Well, what does that save me?" But if you've been using Photoshop for any length of time, these little things add up when you're having to open picture after picture after picture. So just that double click there. Um, and then something that I had shown you earlier. So let's grab another photo here. Um, we'll just go back here to my pictures, and I didn't get enough pictures set up tonight. So here we go. Here I am standing by, one of my dream cars there. Those of you that came out to the airport got their picture taken with it too. This amazing, I believe that thing had a V12 in it. It's an 8.3 liter Mercedes. Beautiful vehicle. But I'll show you one other thing that I wanted to show you. And it was something I showed you earlier. Let's make a little box here. And I'm going to go ahead and let's fill that box in with red. So we're going to fill it in with red and deselect that. Whoop. Did everything wrong there. So let me just make sure I put in a new layer first, and then we're going to go ahead and put our box in there, and we'll fill that in with red and deselect it. My drop shadow. We'll put our drop shadow on that box and say okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and turn the background off so you can see that shadow. Again, this is what I did earlier. Those of you, this was one of my tips for tonight, but I showed you earlier. All I have to do is right click on that effects and say create a layer. It used to be, and I believe it still is, you could say layer. I don't do it this way anymore. And you had to go up underneath layers, and then there was another one embedded. But now all I have to do is right click and say create a layer, and it will put that drop shadow on its own layer. So now I can treat it like it's its own object. Sorry, I got to choose the right one. There we go. So now I can move it where I want to move it. I can also put a mask on it, and I can erase portions of that particular mask. There we go. So see, I can erase part of it. If it's getting into an area that I don't want it to get into, if you've ever played around with layer styles, they can be real cumbersome to work with. So there we go. But I can still, reopen it back up and still make adjustments on that. I can put a drop shadow on top of that drop shadow. I don't want to do that. But there we go. You can start seeing I can lower the opacity now of that drop shadow independently of having to go back into my layer styles. So that was the next one. And then my last little tip is just more of a fun tip. We live in the Facebook generation, and so many of the things we do today are stuff we throw up on Facebook. We're never going to print it. We just want to have fun with it. And Instagram is such a big thing today, and everybody loves these Instagram filters. I'm going to show you quickly how you create a little Instagram filter by using a blending mode. And again, most of these things I'm showing you today, when I teach it, I like to show things repetitively and do little steps just to get you to have some fun and have to see blending modes in action, layers in action, masks in action. So let's go ahead and let's just come right here and say solid color, and we set up a solid color. Now, normally I would tell people on their blending modes, these are our blending modes here that darken. This section, these are our blending modes that lighten. These are our blending modes that deal with contrast. The ones down here are ones that deal with color. And I used to tell everybody, and these are the ones you're never going to use. But I have found recently something like difference, you can actually use it. Because a lot of times we would do something like this and say, what in the world would we ever use that for? Well, let's use that keyboard shortcut that we learned tonight. And I'm going to hit V for my move tool. I'm going to make sure I have that selected. And I'm just going to hit like number 2. So let's get our move tool, hit number 2. So I set my opacity to 20% that way. Let's even try 30. Nah, it really should be 20%. So now you can see I can turn that off and on and kind of get that Instagram-y effect. You know, I can also change the color around by choosing one of my color themes. This obviously is not the color theme to match this particular image, but you get the picture that it just can be fun to play around with our blending modes. So again, that was just something to have some little fun with tinting a photo. Mostly tonight, I just wanted to figure out, show you a couple things. I am going to switch back here, hopefully that you can see me here. And it says, there we go. I am presenting to you, and I have to pop up the little brightness here in my camera so you can see me a little bit better. And I'll bring this across so I'm looking straight at you instead of across the screen at you. So we just wanted to see how this was going to work tonight. Hopefully you were able to follow along. There wasn't too many glitches. We'll figure out how to get Dan on here and make it a little bit more interactive. I believe I need to create it as a group, so then you guys can actually participate and talk. So tonight, I know most of you are just having to watch it on YouTube, or you're just watching the stream there at Google Plus, but we will get it set up and play around with it a little bit more. I was afraid to click on the go live button tonight, and as soon as I did that, it went live and I shut it off, and then it said, thank you, you're done with your broadcast for tonight. So I had to hurry and create a new group. So we'll get those bugs ironed out, and hopefully, again, that it works well for us. Our next step is going to be, now that you've kind of seen a couple things that we're doing, we want to start both an advanced class and more of a basic to intermediate class. So I think the basic to intermediate class is something we're going to start immediately. So over the next week or two, look forward to that. And once we know we've ironed all the kinks out, we may try to, in the next week, do a couple more short lessons to get people involved and just kind of get that down before we share it out with the entire group. So we have thousands of people that are waiting. I just do not want to do that until it's all done. So thank you for being a part of it tonight, and give me some feedback. Send me some messages. Tell me what you saw. Did it work for you? Was the sound bad? All those different things. So look forward to hearing from you, and thank you. Keep on shooting.